This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Ford Pro FinSimple offers flexible financing solutions for all kinds of businesses, whether you're an electrician or run an organic farm. Because we know that your business demands financing that works when you need it, like when your landscaping company lands a new account. Wherever you see your business headed, Ford Pro FinSimple can help you pursue it with financing solutions today. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD. Grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
All right. So today we're going to get into the case of Alianna DeFreeze. And I'm going to entitle this case, Alianna's Alert. And in Alianna's story, her life, we explain her tragic end, and the subsequent quest for justice that highlights critical issues within our community and the system that we live in. However, I do want to warn you that if you are a person who is sensitive about child murders, that this may not be the episode for you. So I want to give you a trigger warning before we begin.
Thanks, Steph. Alianna DeFreeze was born on June 12, 2002 in Detroit, Michigan. And her parents separated when she was young, but they co-parented her with a lot of love and dedication. Shortly after her birth, both parents relocated to Cleveland, Ohio, where Alianna spent her time between both parents' homes. Her father did get remarried, and his new wife embraced Alianna as her own, and they created this loving co-blended family where they loved and adored Alianna, and Alianna loved and adored them. Alianna was described by those who knew her as happy, bubbly, and she really had this innocent-like persona, because unlike most 14-year-olds, Alianna still enjoyed doing some things that maybe you wouldn't think 14-year-olds would enjoy. She still played with her dolls and just engaging in what you wouldn't assume most 14-year-olds would engage in at that age. She attended E-Prep Village, where she actually thrived in academics. She really enjoyed school. She loved going to school, even despite being diagnosed with a developmental delay. Alianna's journey to go to school wasn't easy, right? She lived far from her school, and that required her to take 2 public transportation buses each day. Now, her parents did not like this arrangement. By no means wanted their 14-year-old daughter, by that account, to have to get on a public bus, 2 public buses to get to school. But this was really kind of the only way that they could ensure that she would be able to get to school and get to school on time. They gave her a lot of safety and precautions, including texting as soon as she arrived at school. And so they trusted the process. And then also they felt like the second bus stop that she got on was right across the street from a police station. They also felt like if there was any way that they had to do it, this was the way, because it really provided enough safety that they felt would protect Alianna. On January 26, 2017, Alianna had an early tutoring session at school. She had to be at school at 7 in the morning. So her mother, like usual, walked her to her usual bus stop and gave her a hug and gave her a kiss before she boarded the bus. They were in a rush, but no matter how much they were rushing, because they were running a little bit behind, she still made sure to hug her daughter before she got on the bus that day. But that day, Alianna never returned home. See, at the end of the day, Alianna's mother, Danisha, went to the bus stop waiting for her daughter to get off, and she never did. So she called her father and Alianna's stepmother to see if maybe they picked her up from school instead of the normal practice, and maybe they just didn't get around to calling, Danisha to let her know that, hey, we got her. But they had not heard from her, and they all started blowing up Alianna's phone. Alianna's phone is going straight to voicemail. They're all very concerned at this point. Danisha calls the school because she's like, well, maybe maybe she stayed at the school. Maybe there was some kind of tutoring or something that was happening at the school and that kept Alianna after. But when she called the school, she received news that would shock her to her core. She found out that Alianna never arrived at school that day. In fact, Alianna was marked as absent. And this was the first time that Danisha is hearing of that. Steph, what are your thoughts about after 8-hour day of school, just finding out that your child never arrived?
Yeah, that's very concerning because I'm not sure of the Texas statute about the awareness of letting the parent know that their child didn't come to school. But I know even for me, when I was in high school and in middle school, if I didn't show up, the school called my parents and said, Steph's not here today. And I experienced the same thing with my kids. If I, don't send them to school or they miss because they're sick, if I don't put in any notice, then they're immediately emailing me and telling me at the start of school at 7:45. Your child is not in
5 here in our area, and no later than 8 a.m. If our children are not there, we get a message. And even if you notify them, they still let you know your child is absent. We just want you to know we've marked your child as absent. If Alianna didn't show up at the start of the day, it's mighty strange she didn't get some kind of messaging to notify her of that. I mean, this is not and like Steph said, even back when she was in high school, that was the standard. This is actually in the late 2000s that this is occurring. So it's really unusual that Danisha got no message, or her husband got no message. I said husband, but I meant her father got no message that she arrived.
She immediately calls the police, and she's frustrated, to say the least, but she knows that Alianna is missing and they have lost precious time, because if she didn't show up to school, that's about 9 hours since she was likely missing. They're losing time. And the thing about missing cases, as we've talked about before, time is important. When you can't account for those hours and what she was doing, the police are really truly having to play catch up. The police contact the school and they are trying to identify if Alianna is a runaway, because they always have to figure that out first, right? Was she at a different location and just never made it home from school that day? But there were no signs of her anywhere. Her parents knew that she knew the rules, so she wasn't that child who would just simply go do her own thing and then circle back home later and say, hey, I was doing this. It wasn't typical of her to just go missing. But the police have to rule this out, as we all know. Now, friends and family immediately put boots to the ground and they start searching the route that she took to go to school. And did she ever board the second bus that would eventually get her to the actual school? Police then contact transportation to get footage of the bus that day. And thankfully, that footage was available, because you never know. Sometimes it's a hit and miss with surveillance. They were tackling that issue, but also Danisha was actively frustrated and trying to figure out, why did the school not notify her that her child hadn't showed up to school? And according to the school, they said that their system malfunctioned, so it didn't produce a notification to her. That's just frustrating within itself, I think, because if you know they have a system in place, why did said system not do what it was supposed to.
Right. You're relying on that system to do the job that it needs to do. And their failure to notify her is now causing a massive delay. Because just imagine, right? Imagine, if you will, if they had notified her immediately within the first, hour even of school that she didn't make it. I don't know, maybe we would really be able to readily locate Alianna. But now the failure to notify her has put us at a severe disadvantage. And now we're like completely behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. And I think just knowing that your child could be just out there and you have no idea where she's at is frightening, to say the very least. While she's talking to the school, the police do manage to get hold of that footage, and they see her getting off the bus, the first bus, but not boarding the second bus. And as they talked to the bus driver, he said that he saw her going to McDonald's with a friend and saw her around 3 p.m. getting off of the bus. But neither sightings were confirmed to be her. So although he said, I saw her and she was doing this, they couldn't substantiate that claim. So it's important to know that she had asthma, and that is a medical condition that automatically shoots her to the top of the list. Because when someone has a medical issue and they're missing, police are really concerned because they have to find that person because she could have an asthma attack. She is their first priority. They immediately, and by they, I mean the family, go out and they put flyers throughout the community and they start to search. But I think it's important to note that I'm seeing a trend, and it's not on purpose. But in the last couple of cases that we've covered, it's an emphasis on Black girls missing, just disappearing, and they're young.
Yeah, young Black girls. And here, this story its foundation is in Cleveland, Ohio. And if you know anything about Cleveland, Ohio, there is a lot of young Black girls that go missing in this city. And so the community is also just scared that Alianna is just yet another Black girl going missing, and that she's going to succumb. What happens to these Black girls? Maybe never finding them, possibly being trafficked, or finding them, unfortunately, deceased. And so they're rallying like never, like they're rallying as if their child's life is at issue here, to identify where this 14-year-old girl could be.
I say often, I just love the community engagement that is highlighted in a lot of the cases that we cover. On January 9th, the police launched a search of her bus route, of everywhere she was, including neighborhoods. And they locate a abandoned house. They decided to go into it to search the area, right? It wasn't anything necessarily that distinctly made them want to go into this house, other than they just were already searching that area. And once they arrived at the house, they opened the door and they noticed immediately there's blood on the floor, blood splatter on the walls, and there was a bag of tools located as well, and it had blood on it. It was ripped clothes, and those ripped clothes matched the description of what Alianna was wearing. They also found her backpack. A door was locked in the house, and inside, when they finally were able to get in, they found a body, and it was later confirmed to be Alianna's. It was less than 2 blocks from where she was last seen.
Now, as the autopsy report confirms that it was her, they also are able to give a clearer picture of what happened to Alianna. I want to pause here because although we gave a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode, I want to give that trigger warning again now, because there was severe trauma to Alianna's body. She had bruises and cuts, and it was determined that she was, in fact, sexually assaulted, and she was beaten and stabbed with the tools that they found. Those tools included a box cutter, a screwdriver, and a drill, which was all later identified to be used in the torture of Alianna. Unfortunately, the autopsy report revealed that she was in fact tortured for hours before she was murdered. And as a result of all of that torture that was done to Alianna's body, they were not definitively able to confirm exactly what injury caused her murder. At this point, the police are actively trying to identify what could have possibly happened. They know she didn't board this last bus, so they are trying to see if they can go to the various businesses around where that second bus's location was, to see if they could get surveillance footage that would just be able to track where Alianna possibly could have gone. And so they were able to do that, and that surveillance footage spotted Alianna walking in the direction of where this abandoned house was. And so along that route, they pulled footage from this church that was on the route to where this abandoned home was. And that church actually had cameras pointing on the exterior of their property line, which is just, Steph, like this kind of luck, and I say it's luck, but, just this kind of divine intervention doesn't always happen in these cases that we see, right? Like where they may have footage, but the cameras weren't working, or they may, have like, this is the perfect place. If we could just see her being here, this would show us, but then they don't have the camera footage. Isn't this awesome that not only did the church have cameras on the exterior of their property, but they were working?
Yeah, it's amazing. I talked to my mom just about how much technology is always changing and ever evolving. But in the true crime space, we're always like, the footage doesn't work. It's always like, duh, 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 duh. But, when we get to have these things like Ring cameras, whatever brand it may be, but a camera on the outside of your home that is like easy to access through your phone, or just surveillance that's really easy to access. So there's really good excuse why it's not working. I'm grateful to hear that in this particular case, the church had their cameras running so that the police could identify who it was.
Absolutely. And so they were able to run the footage and able to see Alianna walking in front of the cameras in front of the church. The footage is not great. It's kind of grainy a little bit, but it's clear enough. And see, we can work with, grainy footage, because we can always send that off to a technology expert that can clear that grain up. But they do see Alianna walking in front of the cameras, and behind Alianna is this man kind of lurking. And it appears that he says something to her, and she takes a step back. And when she takes that step back, she kind of walks out of the frame. But luckily, the church has additional cameras and additional angles, and they're able to kind of go to the other angle where they see this man approach her and sort of grab her in a way and guide her in the direction of where this abandoned house is. So at this point, the police have their suspect, but they don't know who this guy is, and they have to go through their records and they try to figure out, can we identify this guy? Who is this guy? And so they start with going through their records of people who have convictions or who has been arrested of similar types of situations, right? Kidnapping, out of abuse. They go through their records and they find a Christopher Whitaker, who is a registered sex offender. Now, this is crazy stuff because he was actually convicted in 2005 for both the assault and stabbing of a young woman, and he only served 4 years. Now, when they compare his mugshot to the footage, they're able to confidently identify that it is, in fact, Christopher Whitaker in the footage.
DNA results confirmed that it was indeed him found on her body. So she was struggling for her life and she had some DNA underneath her nails. 4 days after she was found, they arrested Whitaker. He initially denies everything. He says, "It's not me, no way." Then he changes his story, much like Jalen in our last case. And he said, "Well, was there a couple of days before, but I was with somebody, but I didn't have anything to do with that." Then he says, was there, I did it but I didn't mean to do it. I mean, sir, okay, like help me.
Right. He didn't mean to do it because he was on crack. He says crack is the reason why.
Yeah, he committed this crime, so he's blaming crack. So he really essentially just kind of took himself out of the equation, put himself there, took himself out, and then blamed crack in that order. Then he says that he blacked out because he was on crack, and he really doesn't remember the details. He just recalls hitting her. Everything else was a blur. Her family was grateful that the police immediately acted in this case. And although it did not end up in the way that they wanted, which was their daughter being safely brought home, they felt like they received justice and an overall good situation with the police. They really felt like they had our backs. And I think that Cleveland, the community, showed up as well. They sought the death penalty for Christopher Whitaker, capital murder, and his defense was crack cocaine was, is that a defense, MD? Because last time I checked, I mean, I just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, so his defense, I was not in my right mind. So it's kind of like a borderline insanity defense in some ways. Like, I can't be held responsible for my actions because I was not in my right mind when I did it. Had I been in my right mind, this would never have happened.
Yeah, and the guilty, he is the guilty. The guilty person was convicted and sent to death. In 2018, the city demolished the abandoned property. And 2019, Danisha, Alianna's mother and father, sued the school. Now, this was a good thing because I really do think they were neglectful in this case. Alianna's alert bill was sent to the legislator there in Cleveland, Ohio, and they have a bill entitled Alianna's Alert, which hence our name for this case. But it states that within 120 minutes of a child being absent, they must notify the parents. And in 2022, they reached a $1 million settlement and created a nonprofit organization in Alianna's name. This is the case of Alianna.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. We all know the old saying about teaching a man to fish, and as parents, we want our kids to learn the things that will set them up for success. So this holiday season, give kids money skills that last well beyond 2024 with Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families, where kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely with parental controls built in. Sign up today at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
MD, what is your takeaway for this case?
You know, my takeaway is to follow your gut. I think that Danisha had a gut feeling that something was off. And although she couldn't control, right, she couldn't control when the school notified her. It was nothing she could do about that. But the moment her daughter didn't show up the way that she typically showed up, Danisha acted. And I think that that is so important when you're dealing with, you know, cases like this or just in life in general. I think we get these feelings, we get these gut feelings that something is off, something's not quite right. And oftentimes we don't pay attention. We write it off as I'm tripping, she's probably fine, I'm not going to press the issue. But in this case, Danisha acted. And I really believe that as a result of her moving as quickly as she could. The moment she felt something was off, the police were able to move as quickly as they did. And you look at the life of this case, it went from Alianna going missing, from them recognizing she was missing, and 4 days later, they had their suspect in jail, right? Like, that is unusual. That's not heard of. The community acted, and I really believe it's all because of how quickly Danisha acted. Because she acted so quickly, everybody else was able to not allow the evidence that was there to go missing, to go cold. It was just such a beautiful thing. And so I think it's important that you follow your instinct. It's God-given, right? God gives that to you for a reason. You have to pay attention to it. It's better to follow it and be wrong than to not follow it and you wish you did.
I agree with that. My takeaway is I believe that this case just highlighted the need for better community safety measures, particularly concerning abandoned homes and properties around routes to school, because she was abducted and murdered in an abandoned house. And this just really underscores the dangers posed by neglected urban spaces. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. In Flint, Michigan, where my parents are from and some of our family stays, in the downtown area, they have gentrified that area now. But years ago, they had a lot of abandoned houses. And what happens is that homeless people and disadvantaged people go and take advantage of those spaces. But then you have criminals like Christopher Whitaker who takes advantage of those spaces. I'm so happy that they tore down that house. But it's just, I believe they're in urban areas because the banks or whoever owns these houses just don't care. They just don't care to clear it out, get it out. And although the community, it's not serving the community for them to keep them there.
Yeah, it's not serving the community, and it's also causing crime to escalate, right? It's not serving the community, but it's also doing a disadvantage to the community. It's not like it's just sitting there and there's no harm coming. It's sitting there and harm is coming as a result of that. There's nothing positive that's coming from this abandoned home. So I agree with you, Steph. That is a highlight, and it's something that hopefully we as citizens can rally and increase awareness as it relates to this so that we can make sure that those kind of homes are not in our community.
Yeah. And also just the vulnerabilities that children face of just walking to school, right? And I think there are tons of safety protocols that we equip our kids with and that we let them know and they tell them in school. But I just think that this in particular just highlights the need, like in Cleveland, for them to have that, like that protocols need to be put in place so that the safety of a child can be ensured, because she should be allowed to walk to school, catch buses, and not ever come back home. Like, she deserves to come back home. So that's our case. We hope that you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, friends, make sure you share if you care this episode. This is Murder in the Black.